Hello, everyone. My name is Annette Reed, and I have a little story to share with you about fear and taking risk. Now, a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Portland, Jamaica, a tiny little dot on the map district called Belcastle. And I migrated to the United States at 20 years old by myself with $56. Now, if you ask me about taking risk, I would tell you that that is the biggest risk that I've taken, but that's not necessarily true. And prior to that, I probably would not think that I've taken any risk at all. But when I look back in my life, I was taking risk from the time I was a little girl. Now, I want to share with you the story of the escalator, the elevator, the step ladder, the zip line, and I'll cap it off with a dive under the watery cave. But first, let's talk about the escalator. I grew up in a rural place, so I had never seen an escalator before. My sister, who's older than I, took me into the city and to a store called Woolworth. And she got on this thing that went up, 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 and I was still standing at the foot of this thing because what I saw was these iron looking teeth that the only thing I could think about was if I get on this thing, it is going to make mince meat of my toes. So my sister went ahead of me, and there I was standing there. And she turned around because she was at the top now. And she turned around and she was looking at me and she was really annoyed. She was like, "Come on, come on." And I'm thinking, if I get on this thing, this is going to be the end of my feet. And there is no way I can get on there. And I don't want her to be so annoyed at me, so upset at me. I really want to get on this thing, but I could not. And she kept saying, "Come on, come on." And finally, I stepped on this thing and I was going up, 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 up. And it was time for me to get off. And I was thinking, how do I get off this thing? So I was inside of me, I was praying and I was hoping in those short minutes, in that short minute, that I could get off this thing safely. And finally, I just got off and I lost my balance like that, but I was off. And as we walked through Woolworth, the only thing I kept thinking about was, I hope I don't have to get back on that thing because I did not like it. The fear was that I was going to get injured. The risk was I had to get on it to get up to where my sister was. So that's the elevator. Now I migrated to the United States at 20 years old, and the second week I was here, I had to go find a job. And I made my way into Manhattan with an address on a piece of paper. Now, just imagine me, a country girl in the big city in New York, and having to figure out my way, by myself. So I made my way very early to Grand Central Station, which is where I needed to get off the train. And I got to the address. I was very early, and I got on this elevator. Now, I was the only person on the elevator. I touched the button that says the 30th floor, and the door closed. I remember feeling just a little bit of panic because I had never been in anything like this before. And then the elevator takes off. It's like takes off from the first floor all the way up to the 30th floor, and then it stopped with that jerk, like, and I thought, oh my God, what happened? Then the doors opened. I stepped off. I looked around to see if I still made it, if I were still in one piece. Yes, I was. Inside, I wasn't in one piece. But on the outside, yes, I was. And so I made my way to the agency, and they were open. The person that I wanted to see was not there as yet, so I had to wait. And then on the way down, I was not alone in the elevator. So that's another story of taking a risk, of getting on this elevator by myself, something I've never seen before. This humongous machine that's in front of me that looks like an iron or steel cage or something that was going to encase me and swallow me up. I had no idea what I was doing. So then I started to move around New York, and I got a job working for a family, and then I left after the kids went to summer camp, and I had to get another job. And I got this job that I stayed on for 4 years as a live-in housekeeper. And as I cleaned the house, by the way, I did not think I was a good housekeeper. It was very difficult for me because I grew up in a very small house. And when I came to work as a live-in housekeeper, I mean, these houses were huge. We did not live in such huge houses in Jamaica. Today you go back there and yes, you'll find it like that. But when I was growing up, no, we did not. But anyhow, I started working for this family in New Jersey, and I started to develop a fear of heights. From the time I got on the escalator and then to the elevator, I started to develop a fear of heights. And I did not understand it because I grew up in Jamaica climbing trees. I was not afraid of trees. But as time went on, I started to get this fear of, I don't want to, it's too high. I had a step ladder that I had to use to climb up and, wipe stuff or anything like that. And I remember thinking, I cannot get on this step ladder because if I do, I'm going to get very dizzy. That's another thing that happened to me. Whenever I had to climb up on something, I would get very dizzy immediately. And so I was there for over 2 years, and I cleaned the refrigerator, but I would go as far as I can on my toes and clean around it. I never climbed up to clean the center of the refrigerator. So one day, the lady of the house, she went on the step ladder looking for something, and she realized that in the center of the refrigerator, the top of the refrigerator, was the collection of dust. And she said to me, "You don't clean the top of the refrigerator?" I said, "Yes." She said, "I see you clean around it, but not the top." And she said, before she could say anything, I said, "I'm afraid of heights." And she looked at me as if, "What?" And I said, "I'm afraid to climb up because I get very dizzy." And she said, "Okay, I will clean it for you," because it didn't have to be cleaned all the time. I cleaned it every week, but the middle wouldn't have to be cleaned every time. So she said that, and I felt relieved. But I could not understand why I was being conquered by this little step ladder. Anyway, life moved on. I left that job and I started working in corporate America. And so one day, my girlfriend said to me that her company was having a summer picnic in a park in New Jersey. They rented this place for the day. When I got there with my girlfriend, it was by a lake. And I noticed that there was a zip line going across the lake. Now, I was not afraid of water because I could swim. That was not the issue. The issue was going up on the ladder up to the landing to then be harnessed to zip line across the lake. That was a challenge because that meant taking a risk. Now, I enjoyed the day. I participated in quite a few events, but my mind was always on the zip line because something inside of me was saying, if I don't do this today, right, I don't think I'm ever going to do it again. I kept thinking about it and thinking about it. And I kept going to look. I'd watch people get harnessed, and then they would jump off and woohoo, woohoo, and I thought, oh my God, that seems so much fun. But inside of me, I was nervous. I was filled with anxiety because that would not be easy for me. It looks like fun. It looks like an adventure, but that would not be easy for me. Now, the day went on, and about 30 minutes before, someone announced over the loudspeaker, the park will be closing in 30 minutes. And I thought, oh my God, I have to do it now, because if I don't, I may never get another opportunity. So I made my way up to the zip line. I didn't say anything to my girlfriend. And when I got there were about 2 people online. I was a third person. And so I watched the first person go, jumped off, the second person get harnessed, jump off, and then it was my turn. And I remember feeling like, no, I can't do this. I'm going to throw up. I'm going to pass out. I need to turn around and go back where I came from. All these emotions were going inside of me. And finally, something said, listen, if you don't do this today, you are not going to do it ever. And so I made my way up the ladder, like boom, 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 up the ladder, right on the landing. And I got harnessed. And the guy said to me, you can jump off when I say jump. And I said, okay, because I heard him, but inside of me, I'm thinking, how am I going to do this thing? Am I going to survive this thing? I don't know what's going to happen to me. I didn't tell my girlfriend that I was doing this. All of these things were going inside of me. I was already harnessed. And so he said, okay, jump. And I went. He said, are you okay? And I said, yes, I just need a minute. And he said, okay. I'm going to count to 3, and after 3, you jump. And I said, okay. And I heard 1, 2, 3, and I jumped. And I zip-lined. Well, I did not have to go across the entire lake, because in the middle of the lake were some guys, and they were on this ladder thing, and so they grabbed you before you actually went across the lake. And then a little small boat brought you back to shore. After I came back over on dry land, I thought to myself, what was I so afraid of? What is it about heights that made me so hesitant, that made me procrastinate, that made me filled with anxiety? What is it about heights? And it was my fear. But the thing that I will always go back to is that although I was afraid, I still tried. I still did it. I was afraid of the escalator, but I got on because I felt that I did not have a choice. I got on the elevator because I felt that I did not have a choice. I had a choice on the zip line. I didn't have to do it. But I felt that this was going to be so beneficial for me to get rid of this phobia or this irrational fear, because it was irrational. That this was going to be very helpful for me. And this was a moment that I had to capitalize on, or else I would have regretted it. I would have. Every time I think about how I was able to not be in that space now, because I'm not there now. I'm not a person who's afraid to climb up now. But every time I think about that place where I was, I'm so glad that I took a risk. I took a risk and it paid off. Now I'm going to cap it off with something, because sometimes we take risks that are calculated and we take risks that are impulsive. Some risk, you have to have some research. You have to do your due diligence before you actually undertake that. And this is a moment where I should have done my due diligence and I did not. And perhaps I should not have done that at all, but I did. Where I grew up in Jamaica, we had rivers, and I lived near the sea. I walked to the sea. So I was always on the beach. My generation was on the beach. My mother's generation did not go to the beach. And so there was a river that the water flowed from the mountain, and it flowed over this cave into a basin, right? So a basin it's this huge rock. It's this huge rock, but there's a cavity inside the rock, right? It's like smooth. I'm not sure what kind of stones you call that. We used to call it river rock. And inside that, you have this huge basin where you can swim. And the water falls off this rock, and it happened to be a cave. So what I did not understand was that whenever it rains and the water comes really, really hard and fast from the mountain, it filled up the basin and it overflowed on the sides and everywhere. And therefore, there was not very much air pockets under the cave. I did not have that information. I'd gone to the river before. I saw the boys go under the cave and they stayed a minute or two and they get back out and they go back under and they get back out. And I would think one day I'm going to go under that cave just to see what happened. Because a lot of the risks that I've taken are born from curiosities. I've always been curious. Curiosity got me to America. I would look out the window at my school and I would see the ships going by, because my school was right across from the sea. And I'd see the boats and the ships go by, and I would think, one day I'm going to go on the other side and see what's out there for me. So I was always a child that was very curious. Now, this day, my mother was not home. And you know what happens when your parents are not home. You take risk. You do stuff that you would not otherwise do. And so I decided, after doing my chores, that this is the day that I was going to go to the river and dive under the cave. And when I got there, there were a few people there. My older brother's girlfriend was there. I didn't say anything to anyone. I sat at it's kind of like the bank of the river bank. It was like these grass, really green, really flat grass. And I sat there watching the boys dive off the cave, into the basin, and I waited for them to leave. And I quickly went down into the river and I dived right under the cave. And when I dived under and I got to the back, it was really dark, and I realized that something happened, something is wrong. And I started to panic a little bit, but not much, because I knew I had to turn around and get back to where I saw the light. The light was at the front of the cave where I went under. Right? So I turned around and I went back to the front of the cave towards the light, and I realized that I needed air, and I came up so fast into the air pockets in the ceiling at the front of the cave, because the back was filled in, because we had I think it was about a month of rain at that point, right? And so I came up so fast that I hit my forehead on, I think it's called a stalactite or stalagmites. One goes up in the cave and one comes down. Those kind of jagged formation that are caused by, I think it's condensation or however it's formed under the cave. But I came up so fast that one of them, gave me a gash on my forehead and I started to bleed. Here I was under this cave, bleeding, right? So happy that I found an air pocket, and nobody knew that I was there. So I quickly got out the water. I dived back under and out and up in the basin and up the riverbank and straight home. And my mother came home late that night, so she did not see what happened to my forehead. I went home and I put some Vaseline on there. And I went to bed. And my mother woke me up and she said, "Your father's here." My father did not live with us, but he lived about 4 minutes, 5 minutes walk from my house. And she said, "Your father is outside." And I thought, why is he at my house? He heard that I was at the river today. And I got up out of bed and I went outside. It was full moon. So when I went outside, it was beautiful. It was very silvery, right? So the moon, because I live in the countryside where we don't have the electricity that you have here in the city, you don't really get to see the full effect of the full moon because you have so many lights here. I guess if you are out in the countryside somewhere, then you get to see that. So my father was outside and I walked towards him and he said to me, "I heard you were at the river today. You should not be seen in the company of those boys." And I said, "Okay, Pop." And he said, "Okay, you can go back to bed." My father left his house to wake me up out of my bed to tell me something he's always told me. He'd always say, "Set some standard for yourself in it." So I think that was a part of reminding me to set some standard, that I should not be in the company of those boys. Well, little did he know that I saw the boys, but I was never with them. There was never a point when I was with them, but I went under that cave. And to this day, he did not know. He's no longer with us, but he did not know that I went under that cave, that I took that risk that I should not have taken, because that risk required some information that I did not have. We're always taking risk. We're just afraid to take some, and others are easy for us. But at the end of the day, life requires us to take risk if we want to elevate our lives. If we want to find our purpose and be impactful in so many other lives, it requires us to take risk. And although we're afraid, we can still take that risk, because at the end of the day, we will come out on the other side and be better for it. I hope this is very helpful for you. Go ahead, take that risk. I am.